Snow moved like slow smoke across the empty street. The colony lights were dim, and the wind pressed its cold hand against every wall and window. On Viralia, night was not just dark. It was heavy. It wrapped around the town and made even strong people walk fast and keep their heads low. In the narrow alley behind a closed repair shop, an alien woman named Leora held her knees and tried not to shake. Her breath rose in small clouds, and her hands were so numb that she could not feel her fingers. She told herself not to panic. Panic would make her breathe too fast. Panic would waste her little heat. She counted slowly. 1, 2, 3. Then she counted again. Leora had arrived on Viralia with a shuttle crew and a bag of translator tablets that helped humans and Alaran speak clearly to each other. She had used those devices many times on other worlds. She liked her work. It made her feel useful. But this trip turned into trouble almost at once. The shuttle came down too far from the main landing site because a storm pushed it off course. No one was hurt in the landing, but the pilot said they had to wait for a rescue. Transport. Then another storm came. Then a third. People moved to shelters near the main settlement. Messages went out. Signals crossed and got lost. She tried to follow a small group to a warm hall, but she took a wrong turn in the snow. The landmarks looked the same in the white. By the time she realized her mistake, the wind was louder and the light was almost gone. She found the alley by chance. Its walls broke the worst of the wind. There was a metal bin there, a tall one with black marks inside. It smelled like old smoke. Leora checked the ground around it and found a handful of broken crates and a damp paper bag. She broke the wood into small pieces and set them in the bin. Her hands shook as she sparked her emergency fire stick and blew on the thin flame. The wood caught, and the first bit of heat lifted her spirit. She held her hands over the bin and looked up at the small square of sky where snow fell without sound. That was the first night. On the second night, she learned how fast wood went to ash in this cold. She walked to the end of the alley and looked toward the main street. She saw humans moving past, their coats big and bright, with glow strips on the edges so they could be seen in a whiteout. They walked with purpose. They knew where they were, going. She could call to them. She could ask for help. But each time she raised her voice, a tight feeling came into her chest. She was not afraid of people. She was afraid of asking and being refused. In her home culture, the Alaran believed that a person should give help freely, not because another begged for it. She had given help to many in her life. She had received help too, but mostly after someone noticed a need and offered. Now, hidden by shadows and snow, she felt invisible. Each time a human shape passed, she hoped they would turn their head and see the weak glow from the alley. No one did. By late night, the broken crates were gone. She looked at her clothes. She wore a long coat made from woven fibers that kept out wind but did not hold enough heat. Under it was a light jacket and a soft shirt. The coat had a rip from when she stumbled against a metal hook. The jacket was thin. The shirt was thinner. Leora considered the coat. It was her best shield. She could not burn it. She looked at the jacket. The sleeves were frayed. Her hands were so cold. She took off the jacket and held it in the firelight. The fabric curled and blackened as she fed it to the flame. The smoke stung her eyes, but the heat was more important. She held her palms over the bin again and let the warmth crawl into her skin. That was the second night. On the third night, the wind shifted and came down the alley like a white river. Snow stacked against the bin and tried to smother her small fire. Leora wiped the rim clear with the side of her hand and pressed her body between the bin and the wall to block the gusts. Her hands hurt with a deep ache now. The ache was different from the sharp bite of the first night. It was dull, like a heavy weight. She could not stop it except by holding steady and breathing slow. She thought of home, of the sweet smell of boiled grain, of the small heat lamps in her family room, of the sound of her sister's voice when she sang during the cold months. Thinking of home made her feel both warmer and more alone. She had to find more to burn. She broke the last pieces of crate into thin sticks, even the splinters. When those were gone, she pulled off her long scarf. It was thin but dry. She fed it to the flame and watched the light brighten. She felt guilty as the scarf dissolved. It had been a gift from a friend in a different port town where the air smelled like citrus and the nights were warm. She whispered thank you to the scarf and smiled at herself for being silly. Then she stopped smiling when the wind found a new way into the alley and forced cold air against her neck. Leora set her coat tighter and searched the alley again. There was nothing left to burn. The paper bag had turned to ash. The crates were gone. She looked again toward the street. Lights moved there, and she heard a pair of voices. The words were short and practical. "Check the line. Tighten that." "Okay, let's go." Then the voices faded. She could follow the voices, she told herself. She could run out and wave. She could make herself seen. She stood, but dizziness made the world tilt. She grabbed the bin to steady herself. Her hands had no strength. She slid down again and sat with her back to the wall. By the deepest part of the night, she made a choice. She took off her ripped coat and looked at it in the unsteady light. The fabric was stronger than the jacket had been. It would burn if she fed it slowly. She hesitated. This coat still gave her some protection when the fire died. But without fuel, she would not make it to the morning. She pressed the edge of the coat to the flame. The fire caught in a line. She pulled the coat back, shook it gently, and fed the fire in strips. The heat rose. She leaned close and closed her eyes. Tears warmed her cheeks, and then turned cold in the open air. She wiped them away and kept feeding the flame. That was the third night. Now came the fourth. At first, Leora did not know what time it was. The sky over the alley was a flat shade, neither full night nor day. Snow still fell, but thinner, like the storm was resting. Her fire was small and uneven. Only a few pieces of her coat remained, and they were damp from melted snow. She dried. Then by holding them near the weak flame before feeding them in, she looked at her shirt. It was simple and soft, made from fibers that were kind to her skin. If she burned it, she would have nothing but the thin wrap under it. A smart person would keep the shirt, she thought. A person who wanted to live would burn it. She listened for footsteps. The street was quieter now. The strong hum of house heaters made a low sound, like a distant choir. People were inside. People were warm. Leora moved her fingers, testing them. They felt thick and far away, as if they belonged to someone else. She rubbed them together and tried to bring them back. She told her hands a small joke from her childhood. "If you wake up, I will make you tea." Her hands did not laugh. She stood and walked to the mouth of the alley. The snow there was knee-deep. She stepped into it, lifted her leg, and stepped again. Each step took effort. The glow strips on the sides of the street made a pale path. Far ahead, a house light turned on and then off. A window shade moved. Leora tried to stay upright. She thought of the words she would say if she reached a door. "Please, I am lost. I am cold. I need a warm place for a short time." The words were simple. Her translator tablet could say them too, but her tablet was in her bag, and her bag had been left somewhere between the crash site and here. She had been too tired to go back for it. She should have tried harder, she told herself. Then she told herself there was no use in scolding now. A gust pushed her sideways. She shifted her weight and dug her foot into the snow to keep from falling. The gust faded. She took 3 more steps. Her breath came in short, soft sounds. She saw a small shop with a step and a door with frosted glass. On the glass was a green symbol, a simple circle that meant open when lit. It was not lit now. The shop was closed, but above the door, a lamp glowed. The light was weak, but it was light. Light meant someone had set it to turn on at night. Light meant someone cared enough to keep a light for strangers. Leora reached the step and sat down. The cold of the stone moved through her at once and made her wince. She lifted her legs and tucked her feet under her, trying to make herself small. Her head felt light. The world moved in slow waves. She tried to keep her eyes open. She looked across the street and saw a house with a wide front and a small porch. The porch had a light, too. Behind its frosted window, she saw shadows move. A person? Two? She could not tell. She watched the window without blinking until her eyes burned. She told herself to stand and go to that door. She told herself to knock once, firmly, like a person who deserves help. She placed her hand on the step to push herself up. Her arm trembled. She pushed again. She rose halfway, then sat back down, her breath breaking in a small sound of effort. She remembered a lesson from her training. When words fail, use signals. Simple, universal signals. She lifted one arm and waved it slowly. The motion was small, almost silly, but it was the best she could do. She waved again. The shadow in the window paused. Or did it? Maybe she only wanted it to. She waved a third time. Her hand felt too heavy to lift. She lowered it and pressed both hands under her, arms trying to keep them warm. She looked up. The sky had changed. The footsteps stopped at the bottom of the step. Leora kept her eyes open even though they felt heavy. A figure leaned in from the side, blocking the wind for a moment. She saw a human face under a hood, breath rising in small clouds. The person's eyes were careful, not fearful, and the voice that came was calm and even. "Hey," he said gently. "Are you okay?" Leora tried to answer. The word she had ready, help, stuck to her tongue like ice. She made a small sound and nodded once, slow. Her teeth clicked together without her control. The man's gaze moved over her thin clothes and the way she held herself small on the step. He did not waste time asking more questions. "Can you stand?" he asked. "I have heat inside. It's close." Leora pressed her hand harder against the doorframe and pushed. Her body rose halfway, then trembled. The man put one knee on the step, making himself shorter, and held out a gloved hand, palm up, as if offering a steady stone in a stream. "It's okay," he said. "I'm Daniel. I won't hurt you. May I help?" The way he asked mattered. He did not grab her or pull. He waited. Leora met his eyes for a second and saw nothing sharp there, only focused concern. She put her cold fingers on his glove. He wrapped his hand around hers and stood, guiding her up with slow strength. When she swayed, he stepped closer, and she felt the firm support of his shoulder. "The porch is right across," he said, speaking in simple words. "Short walk. We go slow." They stepped off the shop's stone and into the snow. The wind cut across the street, but Daniel moved to the windy side and took most of the gust with his body. Leora breathed in small sips. Each step was a small, clear task. Lift, place, balance, breathe. The porch felt far at first, then near, then under her feet. The boards gave a soft creak. Daniel opened the door with his free hand. Warmth rolled out like a quiet tide. The room inside glowed with a steady, soft light. A heater hummed from a box unit along the wall, and the air smelled faintly of clean metal and something like spice. Daniel led her just past the threshold and shut the door with his foot. He did not move her far into the room. He kept her near the warm air, but not too close. "Let's take it slow," he said again, more to himself than to her. He turned a dial on the heater down a little. "Too fast heat is bad after cold. We warm you steady." He took off his heavy, coat and wrapped it around Leora's shoulders in a careful way, tucking it so it did not pull on her skin. The coat held the scent of the outdoors and a dry, safe smell of home. He pulled a chair close but not directly in front of the heater, then guided her down to sit. When she reached the seat, her legs shook with relief. The chair's wood felt firm and kind. Daniel crouched to be at her eye level. "Do you feel dizzy?" he asked. She nodded once. "A little." Her voice came out rough, a soft scrape of sound. Speaking hurt, but it also felt like a small victory. "Cold. Long time. I know." He moved to a low cabinet and took out a folded blanket, the kind with a soft side, and a pair of thick socks. He set the socks aside and draped the blanket around her like a cape. "We'll warm your core. Hands and feet later, slow. Can you hold this?" He passed her a small bottle of water. Not cold, not hot. "Sip." Leora took the bottle and sipped. The water seemed to wake up her mouth and throat one piece at a time. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them and looked around. The room was simple. A workbench stood against one wall with organized tools. A small table with 2 chairs sat near a shelf holding bowls, a kettle, and neat rows of tins with handwritten labels. On another shelf, she saw a stack of thick gloves and a coiled rope. Everything was in a place that made sense. It felt like a home made by someone who believed order could make life kinder. Daniel filled a kettle and set it on a small electric plate. "I'll make broth," he said. "Salt and warm. Good for now." He moved with the calm of practice like he had done this before. While the kettle heated, he glanced back at her, checking her face, the color in her lips, the way she held her shoulders. "I am Leora," she said after a moment, her voice a little clearer. "From Ellerin." She touched her chest lightly, a small gesture from her culture that meant present more than me. "Leora," Daniel repeated with care, getting the sound right. "I'm Daniel." He pointed to himself. "Human." He smiled, just a small curve, not asking anything from her, just offering. "You're safe here." The words slid into the room and settled like warm stones. Leora felt the meaning even more than the language. Safe here. She held the bottle in both hands and took another small sip. Her first strong impulse was to apologize. She thought of the door, the floor, the snow melting from her shoes, but she knew from training and from life that apologies could wait. Survival first, gratitude after. The kettle clicked. Daniel poured hot water into a mug with a measured spoon of something light brown and stirred it until steam rose in a slow ribbon. He brought the mug to Leora, holding it by the side so she could take the handle. "Nutrient broth," he said. "Sip very slow. It's warm." She brought the mug close and felt the steam brush her face. The smell was gentle and good. She sipped, just a little. The heat reached her tongue, then her throat, then spread out like a quiet light in her chest. She heard a small sound and realized it came from her, a long sigh she had not planned. Daniel's eyes softened. He pulled a small woven mat to the floor and sat across from her rather than towering over her, keeping his posture easy and open. "How long outside?" he asked in simple words. "3 nights," she said. "This is the 4th. She paused, then added in the simplest way she could, "I burned clothes to make small fire." She set the mug down on her knee and lifted the blanket edge to show the thin shirt and the wrap beneath. It was not pride or shame now. It was sharing useful fact. Daniel inhaled slowly, not with shock, but with deep empathy. "I see," he said. "You did what you had to do." He glanced at the heater and adjusted the dial again by a small mark. "You did well to last." He stood and went to a narrow closet near the door. He pulled out a folded thermal jacket, clean, lined with a simple zip, and set it on a nearby chair without making a show of it. Later, he said, nodding to the jacket. When your body is ready. Leora's eyes moved to the jacket, and then back to Daniel's face. She did not reach for it, not yet. She took another slow sip of broth. Her hands were still cold, but the deep ache had changed to something less sharp. The blanket held the warmth in place, and the coat around. Her shoulders kept the wind out. Her mind began to notice small things. The soft tick of snow on the window, the steady hum of the heater, the faint tune someone had once set up on a tiny clock that now only blinked the hour. She noticed the way Daniel kept checking without. Hovering, heat, water, color, breath, your hands, he said after a few minutes, when some color had returned to her cheeks. We warm them a little now, not too fast. He took 2 small cloths, dampened them with warm, not hot water, and wrung them out. Then he looked to her again. May I? Leora nodded. He wrapped the cloths around her hands like gentle shells. The warmth was quiet, not sudden. Her fingers tingled, then slowly felt more like part of her again. A small tear formed at the corner of her eye, not because of pain, but because kindness could be as strong as fire. She blinked the tear away and focused on the steam rising from the mug. After a while, Daniel set a second chair near hers and held up the thick socks. Feet next, he said. May I give these? You can put them on when you feel ready. She smiled, tiny at first, then a little wider. Yes, thank you. He placed the socks on the floor near her shoes, then looked at those shoes and saw the wet leather starting to whiten with cold. He decided not to move too fast. Finish half the mug, he said. Then we try. They sat in comfortable quiet. When Leora had sipped enough, Daniel passed her a cloth for her feet and turned his head slightly away as a sign of privacy. She eased off her shoes and pressed the warm cloths to her feet one at a time, then slid the thick socks on. The moment her feet met the softness, she closed her eyes and let her shoulders drop. The chair held her well. The heater hummed. You live alone? She asked after a time, speaking slow to match what her mouth and mind could do. I do, Daniel said. It's quieter than I expected, but the quiet is useful. He gave a small half-laugh that did not reach for cheer. I fix things. People bring me broken heaters, old drone parts, lights. I like making order. It helps in winter. You help people, Leora said. It was not a guess. It was a clear line drawn from what she had seen. I try, he replied. Some winters taught me hard lessons. The first years here, we lost power too many nights. The colony was young. We were proud. Pride is not heat. He looked at his hands, remembering. I promised myself I would not let anyone freeze if I could stop it. That promise is a simple tool. I use it. Something soft moved in Leora's chest. She stared at the rim of her mug and let the warmth anchor her to this small, bright moment. I am a translator, she said. My work is words. On the shuttle, I was going to the mining talks. After the crash, I lost the group. I lost my bag. I lost my tablet for words, so I used simple speech from training. She lifted a hand slightly. Like now. You're doing great, Daniel said. He meant it. Her words were careful and clear. He could hear the shape of her mind behind them, disciplined, gentle, trying to keep fear from taking the wheel. After some time and more broth, color sat more firmly in Leora's face. Morning on Virelia did not bring sunshine. It brought a softer shade of gray, a thin light that crept through the frost on Daniel's window. The wind had eased overnight, and the snow outside lay heavy and still, like a blanket that had finally stopped moving. Inside the house, the heater's steady hum had kept the air warm and safe. Leora woke slowly. At first, she didn't remember where she was. Her eyes opened to the sight of a plain wooden ceiling and the faint glow of a porch light through the Window. Her mind tried to piece together the last few hours, burning her last strips of coat, the snow under her knees, the shadow in the window across the street, and then the human man's voice saying, "You're safe here." She turned her head slightly and saw Daniel sitting at his workbench, his back to her, adjusting a small tool with the care of someone who liked things to work perfectly. She moved under the blanket, and the sound was enough for him to glance. Over his shoulder. "You're awake," he said softly, as if not to startle her. "How do you feel?" Leora thought for a moment. Her body still ached from the cold, but the sharp biting pain was gone. "Warmer," she said. Her voice was steadier than last night, though still quiet. "That's good." Daniel set the tool down and came to stand near the couch. "It's early, but the road report came in. The South Road is open. Slow travel only. We can head to the relief camp after you've had something warm." Leora pushed herself up to sit. The blanket slid down and she caught it quickly, keeping it around her shoulders. The air in the room was pleasant, but she wasn't ready to let go of the warmth yet. "I don't want to trouble you," she said. "You're not troubling me," Daniel replied without hesitation. "I told you, Don't leave people in the cold. Besides, I need to check the camp's heater units. It's on my way." His tone was so matter-of-fact that Leora didn't argue further. She simply nodded. Daniel stepped into the kitchen corner and began making breakfast. He moved with quiet efficiency, taking out a small pot, filling it with water, and placing it on the electric plate. Leora watched him without meaning to, noticing how his movements were smooth but not rushed, like someone who had learned long ago that there was no point in wasting energy. "I have grain porridge," he said, looking. "Over." "Simple, but it'll keep you warm on the road." "That would be good," she said. While the water heated, Daniel checked the small radio again. The camp signal was still steady, no alerts, no warnings. Outside, the snowlight reflected on the frost-covered glass, giving the room a muted glow. When the porridge was ready, Daniel brought it in 2 bowls, one for her, one for himself. He set hers on the small table near the couch, along with a spoon and a small dish of dried berries. "Sweeten it if you want," he said. Leora took a cautious bite. The porridge was plain but warm, and the heat seemed to travel through her chest in slow waves. She added a few berries and felt the taste brighten. "It is good," she said. Daniel sat in the chair across from her, eating his own breakfast without fuss. For a few minutes, they were silent, the only sounds the scrape of spoons and the faint hiss of the heater. After they finished, Daniel stood. "If you're ready, we'll get you into that thermal jacket. The rover's warming up outside." Leora unfolded the jacket he had given her last night. It was thicker than her old coat and lined with something soft that trapped the heat quickly. She slipped it on and zipped it up. The warmth settled over her like a shield. Daniel handed her a pair of insulated gloves and a knit hat. "These will help keep your core heat from escaping. You'll still feel the cold, but it won't take you as fast." Leora pulled the hat on, tucking her hair inside, then slid her hands into the gloves. "Thank you," she said again, the words heavy with meaning. Daniel shrugged lightly. "It's just what people should do." They stepped outside together. The air bit at Leora's face, but the jacket, gloves, and hat kept the worst of it away. The snow underfoot was thick, crunching, with each step. Daniel's Rover was parked near the porch, a sturdy 4-wheeled vehicle with heavy treads built for deep snow. Its engine gave off a low, steady rumble. Daniel opened the passenger side for her. "Climb in. There's a blanket inside, too." Leora settled into the seat, pulling the blanket over her lap. The inside of the Rover was already warming. Daniel climbed into the driver's seat and adjusted a few controls before steering the vehicle down the slow white road. The world outside moved past in shades of gray and white. Houses were half buried in snowdrifts, their porch lights glowing faintly. Occasionally, they passed another rover or a lone human walking carefully with supplies. For a while, they rode in comfortable silence. Leora kept watching the landscape, wondering how far she had wandered from the main road before Daniel found her. The thought made her chest tighten. She had been closer to disappearing into the snow than she wanted to admit. Daniel broke the silence first. "When you waved from that shop step, I almost didn't see you. The snow was falling just right to hide you. But you moved again, and the porch light caught your shape." Leora looked at him. "If you hadn't looked out the window—" "I make it a habit," he said simply. "Every hour or so during a storm, I check the street. Not everyone does, but I've seen what happens when no one does." She heard the weight in his voice. It wasn't just about her. There were other winters, other faces he remembered. She didn't ask about them. Some things didn't need to be pulled into words unless someone was ready. The road curved, and in the distance, she saw a cluster of buildings, low, blocky, built for function rather than beauty. A tall signal pole rose above them, blinking, a slow blue light. "The camp?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel said. "Delta Relief Camp. They'll have a Laren staff there, too. Translators, medical, warm gear." As they drew closer, the camp came into clearer view. People moved between the buildings, bundled in heavy coats, carrying boxes or guiding small drones loaded with supplies. The rover rolled up to a checkpoint, where a human in a thick red coat waved them to stop. Daniel lowered his window. "2 for entry," he said. "She's a shuttle survivor." The guard nodded and stepped closer to look at Leora. "Name?" "Leora," she said, her voice steady. The guard tapped something into a small tablet. "You're on the missing list. They'll want to process you right away. Head to Building 3. Daniel drove forward slowly, following the signs until they stopped outside a wide doorway marked with both human and Ilaren symbols for welcome and shelter. Inside Building 3, the air was warm and busy. People sat at tables filling out forms, while others were being handed thick blankets and hot drinks. Leora was guided to a desk where an Ellerin woman with kind eyes looked up from a tablet. "Leora," the woman said, relief in her voice. "We received word from the search team, but we didn't know if you'd made it. Are you hurt?" "No," Leora said. "Just cold. But I am safe now." She glanced back at Daniel. "He found me." The Ilaren woman looked at Daniel with clear gratitude. "Then you have our thanks." Daniel nodded, uncomfortable with praise. "Just happened to be looking." Leora was given a proper thermal coat, new boots, and a warm drink. She sat at a table, letting the heat seep into her again. Daniel waited near the doorway, speaking quietly to a camp worker about the heater units he planned to check before leaving. When she was finished with the intake process, Leora stood and walked to him. "You are leaving?" she asked. "I'll check the heaters, then head back," he said. "Storm might return tonight." There was a pause between them, filled with the hum of the camp around them. Leora didn't know how to thank him in a way that felt enough. "If you had not opened your door," she began. "You'd have opened someone else's, maybe," he said, though they both knew the chance of that was small. "But I'm glad it was mine." She smiled, a small, real one. "I will remember." Daniel tipped his head in a slight nod. "Stay warm, Leora." She watched him step back out into the snow, his figure moving toward the rover. The door closed behind him, and she stood for a moment, holding the cup between her hands. Outside, Daniel drove away, the rover's treads cutting clear tracks in the white. Inside the camp, Leora sat among others who had been rescued, her thoughts steady and quiet. She had survived the cold nights, and she had met a human who lived by a promise to open his door. On a world as harsh as Viralia, that promise was more than kindness. It was life, and she knew that even after the snow melted, she would carry that truth with her like a hidden fire. The days after her rescue felt strange to Leora. Inside the Delta Relief Camp, the air was always warm. The meals came at regular hours, and people passed her with nods or small smiles. It was safe, but her mind often drifted back to the night. She had crossed the street and seen the porch light glowing through the snow. She remembered Daniel's hand reaching out, palm up, steady and patient. The camp gave her a small sleeping space with a cot, a locker, and a desk. It was more than enough, but the room felt quiet in a different way than his home had. There was no gentle hum of tools, no smell of wood and spice in the air, no steady presence of someone checking the window each hour. On the third morning at the camp, she found herself standing near the gate, looking out toward the road. The snow had been cleared into high banks, and the sky was a flat white. She thought about whether Daniel was back in his workshop, perhaps repairing a heater or sorting tools. A part of her wanted to thank him again, but she knew he would simply wave it away. That afternoon, as she was reviewing translation requests in the main hall, the camp's maintenance officer, a tall woman named Marin, came in quickly, brushing snow off her sleeves. "We've got a problem," Marin said to the coordinator. "The east perimeter heaters are failing. 2 are out completely and 1 is running low." The coordinator frowned. "That sector's wind exposure is high. Without heaters, the buildings... There will lose warmth in under 3 hours." Marin nodded. "We need someone who knows those units, and Daniel's the best, but he's outside the camp." At the mention of his name, Leora looked up from her desk. The coordinator sighed. "We can send a rover to get him, but the east road is slow from last night's drift. It might take too long." "I can find him," Leora said before she fully thought about it. The coordinator looked surprised. "You?" "I know where his home is," she said. "He is not far from here. I can guide a driver directly." Marin glanced at the coordinator. "She's right. If she knows the route, it'll save us time." Within minutes, Leora was in a small camp rover with a driver named Tomas. The vehicle hummed steadily as they left the gate and turned toward the south road, then cut east. Leora gave directions, where the snowbanks curved, where the road dipped, where Daniel's porch light would be visible from a distance. When they arrived, the light was on, just as she had remembered. Daniel opened the door, wearing his heavy coat and gloves, a small toolkit slung over one shoulder. "Leora," he said, surprised but not displeased. "You found your way back." She nodded. "The camp needs you. Perimeter heaters east sector are failing." His face tightened in thought, not fear. "That's bad. I'll need my larger kit." He stepped back inside, grabbed a heavier bag, and returned in less than a minute. "Let's go." In the rover, Daniel sat beside her in the back, securing the toolkit between his boots. "How bad is it?" he asked Thomas. 2 heaters out. 1 weak," Thomas replied. "Winds coming in from the east tonight." Daniel nodded once. "We'll need to strip parts from the weak one to get the other 2 running first. Then I can patch the third for the night." The camp came into view quickly, and the rover went straight to the east perimeter. The buildings here were smaller and older, built when the colony first arrived. Daniel moved fast, his steps sure in the snow. Leora followed, ready to help however she could. He opened the first heater unit, his breath clouding in the cold air. Inside, frost had formed on the wiring. "Moisture got in," he said. "We'll replace this section." "Tell me what to do," Leora said. He handed her a small light. "Hold this steady here so I can see the joint. Good. Now pass me the wrench from the side pocket." She followed each instruction carefully. They moved as a quiet team, Daniel focusing on the repairs, Leora anticipating the next tool. The heater roared back to life within minutes, warm air spilling into the icy wind. The second unit was more difficult. A piece of the motor housing had cracked, letting in snow. Daniel used a strip of metal from his bag to create a temporary seal. "This will hold for now," he said. The third unit was barely running. "We'll have to shut it down and take parts," he told Marin, who had come to check on their progress. "Better to keep 2 strong than 3 weak." By the time the last bolt was tightened, Leora's gloves were stiff with frost, but her movements were sure. She had not fixed a heater before, but working beside Daniel made it seem possible. When they returned to the main hall, the coordinator met them. "Good work," she said. "You've saved us a lot of trouble, and kept the east sector warm." Daniel only nodded and glanced at Leora. "She helped," he said simply. Leora felt a quiet pride in that. They sat together at a small table near the heater for a moment afterward, each holding a mug of hot broth. The warmth seeped into her hands, but it was the calm in Daniel's presence that steadied her most. "You didn't have to come get me yourself," he said after a while. "I wanted to," she replied. "It felt right." He gave a small nod, the kind that said he understood. "Then I'm glad you did." Outside, the snow had started falling again, but inside the camp, the heaters hummed strong. Leora knew that whatever the next storm brought, there was a human out there who kept his promise. Not just to open his door, but to act when others needed him. And now she had been part of keeping that promise too. That thought warmed her more than any blanket could. For most of Viralia's winters, bad weather could be seen coming days ahead. Thick gray skies, sharper wind, a steady drop in temperature. But this time, the change came in less than 2 hours. The sky turned from pale silver to a heavy steel shade. Wind screamed between the camp buildings, pushing snow in wild, circling bursts. Leora was in the translation office reviewing a supply list for a joint human-Alaran shipment when the first alarm sounded. A red light began to flash above the door, and a calm but urgent voice spoke over the camp speakers. "Severe wind incoming. All units secure. Shelter protocols active." Her heart picked up speed. She remembered the nights she had spent outside, with no shelter but a narrow alley, and a fire fed by her own clothes. She looked out the window and saw the snow swirl so thick it blurred the nearest building. Then she heard a voice she now knew well. "Leora!" Daniel was at the door, wearing his heavy coat and carrying a sealed case of tools. His hair was dusted with snow. "We've got a problem. The main generator's struggling, and if it goes, the heaters won't hold." She grabbed her jacket without thinking. "Where?" "Control building," he said. "We need to stabilize. The power before the backup gets overloaded." They moved quickly through the covered walkways, snow pounding the panels overhead. The control building was near the center of the camp. Inside, the air was tense. Marin, the maintenance officer, was at the main panel, reading numbers that made her frown. "Power loads spiking," she told Daniel. "2 of the older circuits are overheating. If one blows, we lose heat to the west side." Daniel set his tool case down and opened it. "We'll reroute the load to the newer lines, but we'll have to do it manually." He glanced at Leora. "You can help by monitoring the readings as we work. Call out if the numbers climb too fast." She nodded, moving to the side screen where the temperature and power flow were shown in simple color codes. Green meant stable. Yellow meant strain. Red meant danger. Daniel and Marin worked fast, opening access panels, replacing fuses, and adjusting. The wiring to balance the load, the wind outside shook the building, and once, the lights flickered. "Yellow on the second line," Leora called. Daniel made a quick adjustment. "Back to green?" "Yes," she confirmed. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but slowly the numbers steadied. The generator's hum evened out. The heaters across the camp would hold. For now. Marin exhaled. "That's one crisis handled, but the storm's still building. We've got reports from the far shelter. Their roof paneling is coming loose. If it tears off, the inside will lose heat in minutes. I'll go, Daniel said immediately. I'll go too, Leora said. He turned to her. It's going to be worse out there than you've ever seen. You don't have to— I know, she said, meeting his eyes. But you came for me in worse. There was no time to argue. They suited up in extra thermal layers, face guards, and heavy boots. Marin handed them a pack of emergency sealant sheets and fastening tools. The moment they stepped outside, the wind shoved at them hard, enough to make Leora stagger. Snow swirled so thick it felt like walking through smoke. Daniel took the lead, moving in short, steady steps. She stayed close, one hand gripping the rope that connected their belts for safety. The far shelter loomed ahead, half buried in snowdrifts. As they approached, they could see a section of the roof panel vibrating under the force of the wind, threatening to rip free. Daniel shouted over the noise, "We'll anchor from the windward side first. Hold the panel while I set the fasteners." Leora pushed against the panel, the wind trying to tear it from her hands. The cold bit into her gloves, but she locked her arms and leaned with all her weight. Daniel worked beside her, driving in the first fastener, then the second. A sudden gust slammed into them, almost knocking her off balance. Daniel reached out, gripping her arm and pulling her back into place. "You've got it," he said firmly. They moved along the edge, fastening each section. Snow piled against their boots, and their breath came hard. Finally, the last sheet was secured. Daniel pressed the sealant into place and the panel stopped rattling. Inside the shelter, the air was still cold, but it was holding. A group of Ilaran families sat wrapped in blankets, eyes wide with worry. One of the children looked up at Leora and whispered something in their own language. She knelt, smiling, and answered softly, telling them it was safe now. Daniel spoke to the shelter monitor, giving instructions to keep the heaters on full until the storm passed. Then they stepped back outside into the blinding white. The return to the main camp was harder. The wind had shifted, blowing snow directly into their faces. They moved slowly, one step at a time, the rope between them their lifeline. When they finally reached the control building again, they were covered in frost. Inside, the warmth hit them like a wave. Marin met them at the door. "Roof's holding," she said. "Good work." Daniel brushed snow from his coat. "Let's keep checking the generator through the night. This storm isn't done yet." Leora sank onto a bench for a moment, feeling the heat seep into her. She looked over at Daniel, who was already back at the panel, adjusting readings. In that moment, she saw clearly what made humans different. Not just their endurance in the cold, but their relentless drive to act, to repair, to protect. When the storm finally eased the next morning, the camp was still warm, still standing. The heaters had held, the roof had stayed in place, and no one had been lost to the cold. People moved through the halls with relief in their voices. Leora stood outside, the air crisp but calm now, and watched the snow sparkle in the pale light. Daniel joined her, his breath visible in the cold. "You did well," he said. "We did." "Well," she replied. They stood there in the quiet, knowing that the worst had passed, but that winter would always bring more tests. Still, Leora felt ready for them now, not because she was stronger alone, but because she knew there were humans like Daniel who kept their promises. The night he opened his door had saved her life, but working beside him, through wind and snow, had taught her something deeper. Sometimes survival wasn't just about finding shelter. It was about standing in the storm together and making sure no one was left outside in the cold.